My wife texted me about a client emergency meeting she'd never mentioned before. I was wrapping up quarterly reports at my downtown marketing firm when Amanda's message lit up my phone around 4:30 p.m. on what should have been an ordinary Thursday. The text felt wrong from the moment I read it, not because of what it said, but because of everything it didn't explain. Working late tonight, client emergency meeting just came up, probably won't be home until 10 or later, she wrote with uncharacteristic brevity. Amanda usually over-explained everything, especially work situations, detailing which client, what crisis, who else would be there. This message felt deliberately vague, stripped of her normal chattiness. I stared at my phone, replaying the past month in my mind like evidence files I'd been unconsciously collecting. She'd been distant lately, taking phone calls in the bathroom, stepping outside to answer texts, mentioning Tony from the creative department with increasing frequency in ways that felt carefully casual. Tony thinks this campaign approach could work better, or Tony suggested this new restaurant we should try, always followed by that slight smile she got when talking about something that excited her. I'd noticed how she'd started dressing differently for work too, more attention to makeup, wearing perfumes I hadn't bought her, choosing outfits that seemed designed to impress rather than just look professional. The woman who used to discuss every detail of her workday had become mysteriously private about her projects, claiming client confidentiality when I asked about campaigns she'd previously been excited to share. I decided to test my growing suspicions with a response that shouldn't have triggered any reaction if this was truly a legitimate work emergency. "Hope you and Tony enjoy the brainstorming session," I typed back, deliberately including his name to see how she'd respond. My phone rang within 30 seconds, Amanda's voice tight with panic as she launched into frantic explanations about how Tony wasn't involved in this particular client crisis, how she'd mentioned him earlier because of completely unrelated project discussions, how she couldn't understand why I'd think he'd be at this emergency meeting when it was clearly stated as a different team situation entirely. Her explanations tumbled over each other like someone desperately plugging holes in a sinking story, each clarification creating new inconsistencies that made the original lie more obvious. The woman who'd been married to me for 3 years was suddenly explaining her work relationships like someone who'd been caught in something she couldn't easily escape. I opened our shared location app and watched the little blue that represented Amanda's phone sitting stationary at Meridian Bistro downtown, nowhere near her advertising agency or any client office I knew about. The upscale restaurant was 15 minutes from her workplace, the kind of place with cloth napkins and wine lists that required actual conversations rather than emergency brainstorming sessions. I sat in my office chair, staring at that dot for 20 minutes, watching it remain perfectly still while my wife was supposedly managing some crisis that required her immediate and urgent attention. When Amanda finally came home around 10:45 p.m., she launched into an elaborate story about how the emergency meeting had been canceled at the last minute due to a server crash that affected their entire presentation system, forcing everyone to reschedule for next week when their IT department could resolve the technical difficulties. She spoke rapidly, avoiding eye contact, her hands gesturing more than usual as she described fictional technical problems and rescheduled client calls that would never happen. I noticed the wine stains on her cream-colored blouse immediately, small purple spots near the collar that she hadn't bothered to clean, and the lingering scent of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine clinging to her hair and jacket. Her explanation about the server crash didn't align with anything I knew about her company's backup protocols, the redundant systems they'd invested in specifically to prevent client presentation disasters, the mobile hotspots and backup venues they'd used during actual emergencies in the past. Amanda had always been detail-oriented about work technology, complaining extensively when systems failed, yet tonight she glossed over the technical aspects with vague mentions of connectivity issues and postponed deadlines. She kept checking her phone throughout her story, typing quick responses to messages she claimed were from frustrated colleagues dealing with the aftermath of their technological crisis, but her secretive smile while reading those texts looked nothing like someone coordinating damage control with irritated coworkers. I asked basic questions about which client was affected and what presentation had been compromised, watching her struggle to maintain consistent details about a meeting that had never existed, her answers becoming more elaborate and contradictory with each follow-up question I posed with seemingly innocent curiosity. I spent my lunch break researching Tony Martinez online, finding his social media profiles filled with carefully curated photos of romantic dinners at upscale restaurants, artfully plated meals, and wine glasses positioned for intimate conversations rather than business meetings. His Instagram stories from recent weeks showed consistent patterns of expensive dining experiences, always photographed from across the table as if someone else was sitting in the frame just outside the camera's view, someone he was clearly trying to impress with his sophisticated taste in cuisine and ambience. That evening, while Amanda showered, I searched through her belongings with the methodical approach I used for market research, looking for evidence that would either confirm or eliminate my growing suspicions about her recent behavioral changes. Hidden in her jewelry box, beneath the vintage earrings I'd bought for our second anniversary, I discovered a delicate gold necklace I'd never seen before, engraved with "Forever Yours" T in elegant script that spoke of intimate planning rather than casual gift-giving. The craftsmanship was expensive, the kind of jewelry that required multiple store visits and careful consideration of personal taste, not something purchased impulsively or given between mere colleagues working on creative campaigns together. I photographed the necklace with my phone before carefully replacing it exactly where I'd found it, then continued my investigation by accessing Amanda's laptop while she dried her hair in the bathroom, using the password she'd never bothered to change since our early dating days when transparency felt natural and necessary. Her text message history with Tony revealed 6 weeks of intimate conversations that progressed from professional collaboration to emotional intimacy to explicit planning of physical encounters, messages that read like a romance novel rather than workplace communications about advertising strategies or client presentations. "You make me feel alive again," Amanda had written just 3 days earlier, followed by "I never knew love could feel this intense," words that cut through me like financial reports showing catastrophic losses that couldn't be recovered or explained away with creative accounting. The timestamps showed they were messaging throughout the day, during meetings I thought she was attending, during dinners we shared where she claimed to be responding to client emails, during quiet evenings when she sat beside me on our couch pretending to work while actually planning intimate encounters with someone else who was making her feel things I apparently no longer could inspire. I called Amanda's agency the next morning, using my most professional voice to inquire about scheduling a meeting with their marketing team, and learned from the receptionist that Amanda had requested every Tuesday afternoon off for the past 2 months, citing personal appointments for family therapy sessions that required weekly attendance for relationship counseling. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was using fictional marriage counseling as cover for destroying our actual marriage, telling her colleagues she was working on our relationship while systematically dismantling it with someone else who made her feel more alive than I apparently ever had. I took a personal day that following Tuesday, positioning myself across the street from Tony's upscale downtown apartment building with the patience I normally reserved for analyzing market trends and consumer behavior patterns that required careful observation and documentation. Amanda arrived at exactly 1:30 p.m., dressed in the blue dress I'd complimented her on during our anniversary dinner, carrying the overnight bag she claimed to use for gym clothes but which obviously served a completely different purpose in her carefully constructed deception. I watched her enter the building with the confidence of someone who'd made this journey many times before, her body language relaxed and familiar as she navigated the lobby and elevator system without any hesitation or need to check apartment numbers or building directories. For 3 hours, I sat in my car documenting everything with photos and timestamps, creating the kind of evidence file that would be useful for legal proceedings while trying to process the emotional reality that my wife of 3 years was spending her Tuesday afternoons in another man's bed while her colleagues believed she was working on saving our marriage. When she finally emerged at 4:45 p.m., her hair was disheveled despite obvious attempts to fix it, her makeup had been reapplied but couldn't quite hide the flush in her cheeks, and she carried herself with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who'd spent the afternoon doing exactly what I suspected she'd been doing for weeks. I drove home before her, called a divorce attorney whose number I'd researched during my lunch breaks, and spent the evening gathering financial documents while Amanda prepared another elaborate lie about her therapeutic breakthrough and the progress she was making in understanding her commitment issues. The divorce lawyer confirmed that documented evidence of adultery would significantly strengthen my position in proceedings, especially since our condo was purchased in my name before our marriage and most of our shared assets could be traced to my income and savings from my marketing career. I suggested surprising Amanda with lunch at her agency office on Wednesday, insisting that it was finally time to meet her famous colleague Tony, who she'd mentioned so frequently in recent months, framing it as my desire to better understand her work environment and the creative team that had become such an important part of her professional development. Despite her immediate panic and desperate attempts to redirect our lunch plans toward restaurants across town, claiming Tony was swamped with deadlines and wouldn't have time for social introductions, I persisted with the enthusiasm of someone genuinely excited to connect with his wife's workplace friendships and professional relationships. I drove us directly to her agency building, ignoring her increasingly frantic suggestions about traffic patterns and parking difficulties, her nervous chatter about how surprise visits could be disruptive to creative workflows and client confidentiality protocols that required advance notice for any visitors or family members. The moment we walked into the reception area, the friendly receptionist immediately recognized me from company holiday parties and cheerfully mentioned how wonderful it was that Amanda's Tuesday schedule changes were helping with her family counseling progress, expressing genuine hope that the therapy sessions were strengthening our marriage and helping us work through whatever challenges had required professional intervention. Amanda's face went completely pale as her colleague innocently asked about her therapeutic breakthrough from yesterday's session, while I maintained the pleasant smile of someone hearing about his wife's commitment to their relationship for the first time, nodding along as if I'd been fully informed about these weekly appointments designed to improve our communication and emotional connection. When we reached the creative department, the director spotted us immediately and made casual conversation about current projects, mentioning with slight concern that Tony had called in sick that morning, which was unusual for someone who never missed important client deadlines or creative presentations that required his specific expertise and innovative approach. The director's innocent comment about Tony's unexpected absence completely contradicted Amanda's recent claims about his overwhelming workload and the urgent campaigns that were keeping him busy with extended hours and weekend collaboration sessions that required her input and creative support. Amanda stood frozen between her two worlds colliding, unable to explain why she'd been discussing Tony's busy schedule when he was actually home sick, unable to reconcile her lies about his professional demands with the reality of his absence, her mouth opening and closing without any sound emerging as she realized that every fabricated detail of her deception was unraveling simultaneously in front of witnesses who had no idea they were exposing her elaborate construction of lies and manipulation. That evening, cornered by undeniable evidence and the complete collapse of her carefully constructed alibis, Amanda broke down in our living room and confessed to a 2-month affair with Tony Martinez, admitting through tears to weekly encounters at his downtown apartment during her fabricated therapy appointments that were supposed to be saving our marriage. She described their relationship in devastating detail, explaining how it started with innocent creative collaboration that evolved into emotional intimacy when Tony began complimenting her ideas and making her feel intellectually valued in ways she claimed I never had, progressing to physical attraction during late-night brainstorming sessions that turned into dinners, then drinks, then afternoons spent in his bed while her colleagues believed she was working on repairing her commitment to me. I listened to her confession with the detached professionalism I used for analyzing failed marketing campaigns, taking mental notes of every admission while she explained how Tony made her feel desired and appreciated, how their conversations about art and creativity sparked something in her that had been dormant during our 3 years of marriage, how she'd convinced herself this affair was helping her understand what was missing from our relationship rather than simply destroying it through betrayal and deception. When she finished her tearful explanation and begged for forgiveness, claiming the affair meant nothing compared to our history together, I calmly revealed that I'd known about her infidelity for several days, had documented her lies with photos and evidence, and had already consulted with a divorce attorney who confirmed that her recorded confession would significantly streamline our legal proceedings. I pulled out the separation papers my lawyer had prepared that afternoon, explaining that since our condo was purchased in my name before our marriage and most of our shared assets could be traced to my individual income and savings, She had minimal legal claim to our property or financial resources accumulated during our brief union. Amanda's shock at my preparedness transformed into panic when I informed her that I'd already contacted our bank to freeze joint accounts, changed the locks on our condo with legal authority since the property deed remained solely in my name, and arranged for her belongings to be professionally packed and stored at a facility where she could retrieve them once she'd secured alternative living arrangements. Her desperate pleas for reconciliation and promises to end the affair immediately fell on ears that had already heard enough lies to last several lifetimes. Her attempts to blame our marriage problems on my work schedule and emotional unavailability sounding pathetic after weeks of watching her construct elaborate deceptions to facilitate her betrayal of everything we'd supposedly built together. 8 months later, the divorce finalized with remarkable efficiency due to my documented evidence and Amanda's recorded admission of adultery, leaving me legally and emotionally free to rebuild my life according to my own values and priorities rather than accommodating someone who viewed marriage as a convenience rather than a commitment. I threw myself into personal growth with the same analytical approach I used for successful marketing campaigns, advancing to senior marketing director at my firm after leading a campaign that increased client revenue by 38%, joining a photography club that challenged my creative perspective, starting rock climbing at an indoor gym that pushed my physical limitations, and generally rediscovering interests that had been neglected during years of trying to make my marriage work. With someone who was fundamentally incompatible with my vision of partnership and loyalty. Through the photography club, I met Sarah, an environmental lawyer who specialized in corporate sustainability cases, someone whose passion for meaningful work matched my own professional dedication while bringing an intellectual curiosity and moral clarity that made every conversation feel like an opportunity to learn something valuable about the world and my place in it. Sarah appreciated my methodical approach to planning and decision-making, found my attention to detail romantic rather than boring, and never made me feel like my career success was something to be apologized for or minimized in order to accommodate someone else's insecurities about their own professional achievements. Meanwhile, Amanda's affair with Tony ended abruptly when he learned about our divorce proceedings and realized that his romantic fantasy was about to become a complicated reality involving legal consequences and social judgment from colleagues who had witnessed their workplace relationship evolve from professional collaboration to personal betrayal. She moved from Tony's apartment back to her sister's spare bedroom, took a part-time position at a small local advertising firm after being quietly asked to leave her previous agency due to the disruption her personal drama had caused in their creative department, and now lives in a studio apartment across town while posting carefully curated social media content designed to suggest that her life is more fulfilling than it actually appears. Last month, she attempted reconciliation through a mutual friend, claiming she'd learned valuable lessons about commitment and fidelity, expressing regret about throwing away our marriage for a relationship that proved to be built on fantasy rather than genuine compatibility, but her apologies felt like marketing pitches designed to sell me on a product I'd already determined was fundamentally defective. I've learned to value integrity and self-respect above misplaced loyalty to people who view relationships as transactions rather than partnerships, understanding now that the right person will appreciate your best qualities instead of making you feel like those same qualities are somehow inadequate or need to be changed to accommodate their inability to reciprocate the same level of commitment and honesty you bring to the relationship naturally and without resentment.